These are the craziest moments in F1 history.
Oh, we got the fuel hose on. Kovalainen's car.
Oh, there was a fire in the pit lane as well.
And there's Lewis Hamilton slewing into the wall. And oh dear, Roman Grosjean.
And first, we got the moment when someone invaded the track mid-race.
We've got a lunatic on the track down the hangar straight, 160 miles an hour. Safety car out, of course. The drivers, oh my word.
Man, this priest went crazy. But what's even crazier is the moment when a Red Bull car went flying up in the air. At the 2010 Chinese Grand Prix, Toro Rosso driver Sebastian Buemi got in a terrifying crash when heading down the back straight at 180 miles per hour. Luckily, Buemi escaped the crash and nothing major happened. But we can't say the same for the crash in Monza, because that was pretty crazy. Australian driver Alex Peroni collided with a curb at 150 miles per hour. This terrifying collision sent him flying through the air, flipping several meters before crashing into a safety fence. Peroni surprisingly escaped the scene without any obvious injury, but his racing team later revealed that he did break a vertebra. Damn, he should be getting an award for still racing. And speaking about awards, nothing beats the moment when Kimi Räikkönen got an award.
Kimi Räikkönen and Sebastian Vettel. From the season opener, was leading the championship. With 5 wins, he put up a great fight in the closing round.
Man, drunk Kimi's crazy. But the moment wasn't as crazy as Mark Webber's incident, because what happened to him was simply unforgettable. At the 2010 European Grand Prix, Mark was already having a bad race to begin with, since he had dropped from P2 to P18. But what he didn't know is that his race was about to go from bad to worse. On lap 10, when Mark attempted an overtake on the fastest part of the circuit, Webber's front right tyre caught the rear of Lotus's driver Heikki Kovalainen's car. This impact sent his car flying in the air, landing on its nose at 190 miles per hour, before bouncing and crashing into the tyre barrier. Luckily, Webber wasn't hurt, but the car did become a total disaster. Man, that's brutal. But you know what else was brutal? How about the time when one driver took out 7 cars out of the race in one instance? Or the time when one driver almost retired from the race, but instead ending up winning it? We'll get to all of that in this video. But first, let's talk about the time when Michael Schumacher got involved in a situation which has only happened once in F1 history. With Schumacher leading by just 1 point and Villeneuve trailing behind, the stakes were as high as they could be at the European Grand Prix. So both drivers were trying to set their best times in qualifying. However, what actually happened was something no one saw coming. They both set the same exact time. Exactly the same, down to milliseconds. And to make matters even more complicated, Villeneuve's teammate Frentzen also set the same time in qualifying. Now that's crazy. But not as crazy as the moment in the 2011 Canadian Grand Prix, because what happened there was nothing less than a miracle. In the rain-soaked track, Jenson Button started P7, and at lap 7, the race got a safety car when Jenson collided with teammate Lewis Hamilton, which forced Hamilton to retire. But when the race resumed again on lap 13, Button also got a drive-through penalty for speeding behind the safety car, which left him back in 15th place. Now, seems like things couldn't get any worse for Jenson, right? Wrong. Because fast forward to lap 37, he was involved in another collision with Alonso, which forced the Spaniard to retire. The collision, however, punctured Jenson's car too, which ended him in the last place, and over 1 minute 40 seconds behind race leader Vettel. But Button still didn't give up. He quickly made up positions and was 14th by lap 44, and by lap 46, he had caught Maldonado and Alguersuari and passed others too for 10th place. And with his tyres changed to slicks due to the drying line, Button made his way to the front, getting past Michael Schumacher and Mark Webber, before setting his eyes on Sebastian Vettel with only 5 laps remaining. On the final lap, Vettel had a 0.9 second lead and seemed like he was about to win, when suddenly Vettel made a costly error at turn 6. He ran wide, causing his RB7 to spin under pressure just halfway through the final lap, which allowed Button to overtake and win the race. From last position to first. Now that's some comeback story. I think it just shows that you should never give up in this sport. Everything went wrong up until when I won the race. Clearly, it was one of the best rain races ever. But while rain helped Jensen's race, we can't say the same for Lewis Hamilton, because what rain did to him and others in European GP was simply ridiculous. After the start of the race, Nürburgring suddenly got hit by a huge rainstorm, and soon it became so unbearable that drivers couldn't even control their cars anymore. Jenson Button was the first to spin off the track. Then there goes Lewis Hamilton, then Adrian Sutil, then Nico Rosberg, Scott Speed, and Vitantonio Liuzzi. All crashed in the same corner within seconds. I mean, the whole circuit turned into a river. Now that's crazy. But still not as crazy as what Sebastian Vettel did in Monza, because that was just unbelievable. Before the 2008 Italian Grand Prix, Sebastian Vettel had only taken 19 points in his F1 career while lining up for the Scuderia Toro Rosso racing team. But what he did in Monza changed everything. 21-year-old Vettel stunned the world by claiming the pole position for the Toro Rosso STR3 team. But that wasn't the most spectacular thing to happen at the race weekend, because the German driver also won the race, finishing a resounding 12 seconds ahead of Heikki Kovalainen's McLaren. It was a true underdog story, because not only was it Vettel's first win, but also the small racing team's first ever win in Formula One. Even Toro Rosso's team principal couldn't believe it. It's just unbelievable. Sebastian wrote something into Formula One history today. We also dream of a podium, and the first podium is P1 in Monza, the most amazing racetrack in the world. Damn. But you know what's really unbelievable? The horrific crash that shocked the world. It was 1993, and legendary driver Damon Hill took the checkered flag at the Belgian GP. But that wasn't the highlight of the race. As other drivers were pushing towards 200 miles per hour to make it to the finish line, Minardi's teammates Christian Fittipaldi and Pierluigi Martini were running close to each other. And soon, Fittipaldi with his M193 got a little too close when he tried to overtake Martini. But then, disaster happened. Because instead of having a simple touch between both drivers, Fittipaldi's car flew into the air, did a 360-degree backflip before landing, and still managed to get across the line. Yeah, that actually happened. Luckily, this dangerous moment left no one hurt, and both finished the race without losing any position. But this incident did leave Fittipaldi enraged with his teammate. I was so glad to be alive. I won't waste time in my life to argue with a fool like him. For me, he was dirty, an imbecile. From that day, I never talked to him again. I have nothing against him, but for me, him and a trash can on the street is the same thing. You know, I don't think we're going to see a moment that crazy again, and we're probably never going to see anything like this next moment again either, which surprisingly happened not that long ago. A lot of people already know that Esteban Ocon won his first F1 race in the 2021 Hungarian GP. Now, even though this was huge, it still wasn't the biggest thing that happened in the race, because in the first lap, and literally at the first corner, ex-Mercedes driver Valtteri Bottas broke too late and ran into the back of Lando Norris. This caused Red Bull drivers Verstappen and Perez to also get caught up in the collision. So 4 cars collided in one instance. But that wasn't all, because Aston driver Lance Stroll also made a mistake, colliding with Leclerc, who then smashed into Ricciardo's McLaren. All of this happened in the same one corner at the same time. Now that's just crazy. And because of this, the race was obviously red flagged. But what's interesting is that before this incident, all the drivers were racing on intermediate tyres. But at the time of restart, the track had already dried out almost instantly. So at the restart, all the drivers pulled into the pits for a fresh set of slick tyres, except one, Lewis Hamilton. This made Hamilton the only one starting the race on the starting line, while the rest lined up in the pits. The only one. I mean, what a bizarre moment. But as bizarre as it wasn't crazy enough as what Ayrton Senna accomplished, because what he pulled off in Brazil was simply unbelievable. Ahead of the race in 1991, Senna claimed pole position, outrunning the Williams duo of Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell, teammate Gerhard Berger, and Ferrari's Jean Alesi and Alain Prost. Senna even had a perfect start to the race, sprinting away ahead of the rest of the drivers. However, after Senna pitted, Mansell cut his lead to just 7 seconds and was closing in on the Brazilian. And to make matters worse, Mansell's conviction to win grew even stronger when Senna's gearbox began to fail as he lost the fourth gear, and by lap 60, Mansell cut Senna's lead in half. But luckily for Senna, at the 61st lap, Mansell had his own gearbox issue as it slammed into neutral, then second, which ultimately sent the British driver into a spin and out of the race. But at the same time, Senna quickly lost all the gears as well, except the sixth, with Williams' Patrese hot on his tail. But somehow, in an unbelievable way, Senna maintained the sixth gear till he crossed the finish line 2.9 seconds ahead of Patrese, which earned him his first home race win. This race was so difficult for Senna that the pain of trying to keep the car under control even caused him to develop muscle cramps. And it was so severe that he literally had to be lifted from his car and even needed support to stand on the podium. Man, now that was a brutal race. But you know what else was brutal? The most devastating crashes that happened in F1. Like one crash that Verstappen caused, which ended up destroying an F1 driver's career. Or another crash which was so unbearable that it even bankrupted the entire F1 team. And I know you want to know more about this, so just click the video right here.